Well, let's talk more about those polls, because joining us now is the former leader of the SNP, Alex Sammond. Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, Labour are not wasting any time in saying if the SNP do well in Scotland, it's a boost for the Conservatives taking over the United Kingdom.
Yeah, well, unfortunately for the Labour Party, they ruined that argument by high-fiving their way through the referendum campaign with the Tory party. And for an increasing number of people in Scotland, we don't see any difference in terms of austerity economics between the Labour and Conservatives. And of course, whether or not there's a Conservative government will be determined by the number of Tory MPs in England. What Scotland will determine is how much influence we have in the next Parliament. Because as Nicola Sturgeon has already made it absolutely clear, we won't have any countenance with the Tories informally or formally in any shape or form. So what we can do in Scotland is have a decisive influence in the next Parliament.
Sorry to interrupt, but you do see then a very big difference between Labour and Conservative at United Kingdom level. Those voters in Scotland who say they're all the same are wrong, because you would do business with one but not the other.
Well, we can't do business with the Conservative Party for two reasons. One, their historical decline in Scotland, because people see them as hostile to Scottish interests, but also in particular because of David Cameron, the day after the referendum, waltzing out of Downing Street and trying to rewrite the terms of the offer, the vow that was made to Scotland on additional powers. You can't do business with people who behave like that to Scotland. We think we can do business with the Labour Party and use the influence that Scotland has to make sure that progressive politics like the living wage, like not going ahead with another ruinous nuclear missile system, like an end to austerity economics, can be brought to bear. And working with our allies in the Green Party and Plaid Cymru, we can be a progressive and perhaps a decisive force in the next Westminster Parliament. And that's widely welcomed in Scotland, as the poll indicates, but I think there's lots of people across these islands who'll welcome that sort of progressive politics.
Are you going to set out red lines clearly before the election? I mean, on, for example, Trident, is that something that would be decisive in whether you could do a deal with the Labour Party after the election, a supply and confidence and supply motion, for example?
Well, that's what Nicola Sturgeon's been doing over the last few weeks, and been doing it superbly well. Certainly for a resounding degree of support from the people of Scotland, as these polls indicate. And the issues that she's raised are issues like the non-renewal, not wasting £100,000 million over the next generation in renewing a missile system, an end to the austerity economics, which unfortunately Labour currently have signed up for, but which many Labour supporters would like to see a departure from, and issues like the progression of the living wage, which we've done so well in Scotland, pursuing the living wage as a policy of social justice. So Nicola Sturgeon has laid out our clear attack and our lines in the campaign, things that we can gain for Scotland and for progressive politics in general.
Yeah, and Ed Miliband is not talking about doing a deal with you at all at the moment. Hasn't completely ruled it out, but he's not talking about doing a deal with you. He doesn't want to do a deal with you because you're not a unionist party.
Yeah, well, no doubt. But, I mean, you know, Ed Miliband campaigned with David Cameron in last year's referendum and has done the Labour Party extraordinary damage. I mean, that's going to last for a generation in Scotland. You can't high-five with the Tories one year and the next year say you're totally different. So he's done himself and his party a great deal of damage. And by electing an arch-Blairite and pro-nuclear, pro-war MP like Jim Murphy as a Labour leader, all they've done is accentuate that damage. So let's make the case positively for progressive politics. Progressive politics coming from Scotland, but it looks like we'll have a substantial influence in the framework of the next House of Commons. This is a hopeful, very optimistic, joyful thing that's happening in Scotland, the breaking of the Westminster establishment and a chance to chart a new direction for politics.
Not everybody is obviously as happy with the polls as perhaps you are. But look, can you use this opportunity just to reconfirm your vows? Just reconfirm your vows made at the time before the referendum that would be the only referendum for a generation. It's not going to come back. There's not going to be another one, because some of your colleagues, I think, are beginning to suggest, well, look, we're doing very well now. Maybe we should say in the Scottish election in 2016 that we want another referendum. But you wouldn't have any truck with that, would you? Because you've been quite clear that there won't be another referendum for a generation.
Well, two things. Nicola Sturgeon has set out the terms in which we are fighting this general election. That's the one in May. That's the one where we're commanding such massive support at the present moment among the Scottish people and competing and working hard to try and win in constituencies the length and breadth for Scotland. Secondly, I'm in the fortunate position as the former leader of the Scottish National Party and the ex-First Minister of being able to look at your monitor and say to you, look, the tactics and strategy for the future of Scotland in terms of referendum is a matter for my successor, Nicola Sturgeon.
Right. OK, well, we'll take that as understood. Alex Sammond, thank you very much indeed.
Great pleasure.
Now,
thank you.
Here with me in the studio is the Scottish Labour MP, Dame Anne Begg. You must feel terrible tonight. I don't know what your seat is what's going to happen in your seat, but there are barely going to be any Labour ones left if we believe these polls.
No idea what's going to happen to my seat. We'll have to wait till the next Ashgrove polls, perhaps. But yes, this is not a pleasant place to be. I'd much rather we were doing better. But often when our back's against the wall, that's when Labour, we come out fighting, and we will be fighting in every constituency to make sure we hold on to what we've got. I think the big flaw in Alex's argument is he seems to be saying to the people of Scotland, we'd rather have a Labour government, but the way you get a Labour government is to defeat Labour MPs, and that's just not logical to anyone else other than the hardline SNP.
Why do you think you're doing so badly in Scotland? What has happened?
I think there's certainly an element of the fact that we're perceived as being in bed with the